looking at our last topic of this unit, we are going to talk about slope, specifically a slope formula and midpoint. So, given that we now have an understanding of graphs of linear equations, we can now pull some information if we're given 2 points of a linear equation. So if we want to find the slope given 2 points, we can use this following information. So let's say we have a point x1, y1, and x2, y2. We can plug in these values into this formula here. So let's say we have the points 4, 2, and 3, 4, right? So if we were to plug in these points into this equation, we would get out the slope of a linear equation. And then, given the same 2 points, we can use this midpoint formula, which is the midpoint is a point that is directly the middle point between 2 given points. In other words, the midpoint is the average point that lies between the 2 points. So to find the midpoint, we have to use this equation here. And notice, if we're given this point and another point, if we use this midpoint formula, whatever these points happen to be, whatever these values happen to be, if we use this formula, we'll find this point here directly in the middle of these 2 points. So let's use these formulas to go through some examples. So given the points 4, 9, and 6, 1, let's find the slope and midpoint. So I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own. Now let's work through it together. So this first point here, 4, 9, 4 is going to be our x sub 1 value, or x1 value. 9 is going to be our y sub 1 value. 6 is going to be your x sub 2 value. And 1 is going to be our y sub 2 value. So using that information, let's find the slope. Remember, m is used to denote slope, or is the slope, because remember, from y equals mx plus b, m is our slope. So that is why you'll see in this slope formula here that it's set equal to m. So m is used for slope. So our slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's plug in those values. So y2 we set as 1. y1 we set as 9, so we're going to subtract 9, and we're going to put that over x2, which is 6, and x1, which is 4. So we have 1 minus 9, which is negative 8. And then 6 minus 4, which is 2. And negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And that is our slope given these 2 points through a linear line. Now let's find the midpoint between these 2 points that lie directly in the middle of these 2 points. So midpoint. To find the midpoint, we're going to use this midpoint formula here, boxed in green. So we're going to do x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. So we said x sub 1 is 4. So we're going to do 4, and then x sub 2 is 6. We're going to do 4 plus 6 over 2. Put parentheses around this. Put that comma there. And then y sub 1 plus y sub 2. And y sub 1 is 9. So we're going to do 9, and then y sub 2 is 1. We're going to put that over 2. So let's simplify this. So 4 plus 6 is 10. So we're going to do 10 over 2, comma. Well, 9 plus 1 is also 10. Put that over 2. Well, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we're going to get the point 5, comma, 10 divided by 2 is also 5. So that is our midpoint. So this point here, 5 comma 5, is telling us that 5 comma 5 is directly in the middle of these 2 points. So if we were to graph this linear equation with this slope, you would realize that these 2 points here are equidistant, meaning they're equally as far as this point here. Looking at example 2, I encourage you to pause the video if you did not try the first example on your own, and work through this problem. So, as always, assign what your values are. So we're going to have x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So our slope, remember, is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Or in other words, notice that this is the change of our y values over the change in our x values. If you can notice this trend from this formula, you'd be like, wait a minute, well, this slope formula is just another way to write rise over run. Right? So that helps you remember the slope formula, that our y values go on the top and the x values go on the bottom. That might help you out a little bit to write that there. So let's plug in those values. So we have y sub 2, which is 18, minus y sub 1, which is 15. And then x sub 2, negative 10. X sub 1, negative 5. So we're subtracting that negative 5. Be careful with your negative signs. So 18 minus 15 is 3. And then negative 10 minus negative 5 becomes negative 10 plus 5. So we have so we have 3 over negative 10 plus 5. That becomes a negative 5. So negative 3/5 is our answer, or that's our slope. And then our midpoint, well, that's going to be, remember, we're going to add up our x values and divide it by 2 to find the average. So we're going to do x sub 1, which is negative 5. And then we're going to add x sub 2, which is negative 10. Divide that by 2. And then we are going to add up our y values and divide by 2. So y sub 1 is 15. Y sub 2 is 18. Divide that by 2. Well, negative 5 plus negative 10, that is negative 5 minus 10, which is negative 15 over 2. And then we have 15 plus 18 over 2, which becomes 33 over 2. And that is our midpoint. All right, so for our final example of this unit, we have this following example. You are given a midpoint and another point, point B. Using the midpoint and this point, we're going to find the other point that is missing by graphing a linear equation that passes through the midpoint and this point. So we're given this midpoint, which is here. Remember, the midpoint is this point here in the middle. And then we're given another point like this. So we're given a midpoint, and then we're given one of these points. And our goal is, by graphing this linear equation, to find the other missing point. So let's go through this. So looking at this, I encourage you to pause the video and try this on your own, though, and try and think through the process of the tools you have learned in this unit. to find the answer to this other point. So let's start off. What I would first do here is find the slope between these 2 points. So let's say this is x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Well, we can plug those values into our slope formula. So we have y sub 2, which is 0. And then we're going to subtract y sub 1, which is 1. And then x sub 2 is 2. And then we're going to subtract negative 1. So this becomes negative 1 over, well, 2 plus 1. So negative 1 over 3. So this is our slope, negative 1/3. Now, let's graph this equation, because we can actually graph this equation from the slope in these 2 points, right? So we can plot these 2 points on the graph and then make a linear equation and then go from there. So I'm gonna draw out the xy plane. So we're given x and then y. So let's go out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops. Let's go a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So we know we have these 2 points. So I'm going to plot those. So we have 2, comma 0, which is here. And then we also have the point negative 1, comma 1, which is here. So we know that the point negative 1, comma 1, which is right here, we know that this is our midpoint. So I'm going to say, no. I'm going to say midpoint. This is our midpoint. So going from our midpoint to the other point, which is going to be somewhere over here, we can use the slope that we found and go from here to this point over here. So we have a negative slope, negative 1/3. So that means, right, we're going to be going down. But in this case, because we want the value that's above the midpoint, we're going to have to go backwards. So we're going to have to go actually up 1. But instead of going right, we're going left, remember, because it's a negative slope. So we're going up 1 and then right 3. 1, 2, 3. Nope. That is not that good. There we go. Right, so this is our other endpoint. This is what we want to find. This is what we want. This is the point we want. But let's just draw this line here real quick. So this is what our line looks like. And using this, well, we're going, the midpoint we know is 1, comma 1. We're going up 1 y value. So we're going to do negative 1. Taking negative 1 from a midpoint, we're going to go to negative 1 plus 1 from our slope. And then for our x value, right, we're going, sorry. I made a mistake here. So what I meant to say, so we have negative 1 from a midpoint. And then we're going to be going left 3 values, which means we're going to be subtracting 3. So we have 1 minus 3. And then we have, for our y value, midpoint is at 1. And then we're going to be going up 1 from the midpoint. So we're going to be going up 1. So that means we're going to add 1. So we have -1 minus 3, which is -4, and then 1 plus 1, which is 2. So this is our other point. Now, does this point match up with this point here? Well, let's check. -4, comma 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2. Yeah, this matches up. There you go. By the way, a problem like this will not be on the homework or the test. This is actually this is a challenging problem. But I just wanted to give us some critical thinking before this course comes to an end. Well, thank you and enjoy your day.